The snow fell quietly over the old palace walls, covering the ground like a white blanket. The world outside seemed peaceful, calm, even beautiful. But inside the palace, behind the tall windows and heavy curtains, a storm was rising. A storm that would soon tear apart an empire. My friend, this is the story of a man who held a crown that was too heavy. A man who was born into power but trapped by the weight of history. His name was Nicholas II, the last Tsar of Russia. Nicholas was born into a world of gold, silk, and ceremony. From the day he opened his eyes, people bowed when they saw him. They whispered his title with respect. They believed he would one day rule the largest empire on earth. Yet even as a child, Nicholas felt something deep inside. A quiet voice telling him, "You are not ready." But in the world of kings and emperors, readiness did not matter. Destiny did. When Nicholas's father, Tsar Alexander III, died suddenly, the young man was pushed into power. He stood in front of millions, wearing a crown heavier than any responsibility he had ever known. People cheered, soldiers saluted, priests blessed him as Emperor of all the Russias. Yet inside his heart, Nicholas whispered to himself, "I am not prepared." His greatest fear was not ruling poorly. His greatest fear was ruling at all. But there was one part of his life that brought him strength: his love for Alexandra, a princess from Germany. When they met, Nicholas felt something he had never felt before: the freedom to be his true self. He did not have to act like a king. He did not have to wear a mask. With her, he was simply Nicholas. She saw the softness in him, the gentleness, the quiet soul behind the crown. And despite the struggles ahead, they loved each other with a deep, unshakable devotion. Nicholas and Alexandra soon had children, 4 daughters, and finally, 1 son, Alexei. Their family life was warm, loving, and filled with laughter. In private, Nicholas was a patient father, a devoted husband, and a man who dreamed of peace. But outside the palace gates, Russia was boiling. The people were hungry, workers were angry, soldiers were tired. Revolution was rising like fire under dry wood. The problem was not that Nicholas was cruel. The problem was that he did not understand the world that was changing around him. Russia was moving fast, but Nicholas remained still. The people cried for bread, for work, for freedom. Yet Nicholas believed he was chosen by God to rule with absolute power. He trusted tradition more than advice. He trusted prayer more than politics. He trusted silence more than action. And slowly, dangerously, he lost the trust of his own people. Then came a moment that changed everything. Bloody Sunday, the day peaceful protesters marched to the Winter Palace to ask for help. They were unarmed. They carried icons and banners. They wished to speak with their Tsar, believing he would listen. But the soldiers opened fire. The streets turned red. Dozens fell. Hundreds were wounded. And the hearts of the Russian people shattered. From that day, the nation whispered the same words: "The Tsar does not hear us." Nicholas was shocked. He had not ordered the attack. He had not wanted bloodshed. But he failed to understand that a king is responsible not only for what he commands, but for what he allows. And in the eyes of the people, Nicholas had allowed tragedy. His image as father of the nation was replaced by the blind Tsar. Years passed, and the world changed even more. Factories grew, cities expanded. New ideas about freedom and workers' rights spread like wildfire. Revolutionaries spoke in secret meetings. Writers filled newspapers with criticism. Students marched in the streets, and Nicholas kept holding on to the past. Then came World War I, a disaster that Nicholas believed would unite his people. Instead, It destroyed what little hope remained. Millions of Russian soldiers died on the front lines. Food became scarce. The economy collapsed. The empire trembled. And Nicholas made a decision that sealed his fate. He personally took command of the army. He went to the front trying to inspire his soldiers. But he was not a military genius. He was gentle, kind, and indecisive, qualities that made him a good man, but not a good general. Russia suffered defeat after defeat. Morale dropped. And while Nicholas was away with the army, Alexandra was left to govern the empire. She trusted a mysterious monk named Rasputin, who claimed he could heal her son Alexei's illness. Rasputin's influence over the royal family angered nobles, ministers, and generals. They distrusted him. They feared him. They believed he was destroying the monarchy from within. Whether or not these fears were true, the damage was done. Rumors spread. The empire's image crumbled, and the royal family became a target of hatred. By 1917, the country could no longer endure the suffering. Bread lines grew longer. Riots exploded in the streets. Soldiers refused to fight. Workers seized factories, and the people shouted one name, Nicholas! But this time, they did not shout with respect. They shouted for change. Nicholas returned from the front to find his empire collapsing. He wanted to calm the nation. He wanted to bring peace. But the world around him was moving too fast. He signed a document that echoed across history. His abdication. With a single pen stroke, he ended 3 centuries of Romanov rule. He was no longer emperor of all the Russias. He was simply Nicholas Romanov, a man without a crown, a man without a country, a man facing the unknown. The new government placed Nicholas and his family under house arrest, first in their palace, then in a distant Siberian town. They lived quietly, peacefully, almost humbly. Nicholas chopped wood for warmth. Alexandra sewed clothes. The children read books and played games. For the first time, they lived like ordinary people, and in a way, they were happier. But revolution does not forgive easily. A more radical group, the Bolsheviks, rose to power. They believed the Romanovs were a threat to the new future they wanted to create. And so, in the darkness of night, the family was moved again, this time to a small house in Yekaterinburg, a house with locked windows, a house surrounded by guards, a house where even the children sensed something was wrong. Nicholas tried to stay calm. He wrote in his diary. He prayed. He comforted his daughters. He held Alexei when the boy felt sick. He did everything a father could do, except save them. Because in that moment, the Tsar who once ruled an empire could not rule his own destiny. Then came the night that history will never forget. A knock on the door, a command to gather in the basement, a cold room, a small window, a single dim light. Nicholas looked at his family, his wife, his 4 daughters, his frail son, and he whispered softly, "God's will be done." In that room, the dynasty ended. But the story of Nicholas II does not end with tragedy alone. It ends with a lesson about leadership, responsibility, and the heavy cost of silence. Nicholas was not a monster. He was not cruel. He was not heartless. He was simply a man born into a storm he could not control. He wanted peace, but he lived in a world of revolution. He wanted to love, but he was forced to rule. He wanted to protect his family, but he could not protect his empire. And so his story reminds us that power without understanding is fragile. Tradition without change is dangerous. And silence in times of crisis can be louder than any command. Today, when people speak of Nicholas II, they see a man of contradictions, gentle yet stubborn, loving yet distant, hopeful yet lost. The last Tsar of Russia was not destroyed by hatred. He was destroyed by history itself, a history that moved faster than he could follow. Yet his memory lives on. His diaries, his letters, his family photographs, all whisper the same truth. Beneath the crown was a man, flawed, quiet, overwhelmed, but deeply human. And perhaps that is why his story continues to touch hearts even after more than a century, because behind every title, behind every throne, behind every moment of glory, there is always a human heart trying to do its best in a world filled with uncertainty.